I'm in my second semester here at UNF. Before that, I was in the Middle East because I was in the Navy. Oh, the stories I could tell. But I never thought I would hear stories like what you're going to hear tonight. You're going to hear stories from restaurants, hotels, a downtown library, the county courthouse, and the Jacksonville jail. You will hear stories from mothers, fathers, attorneys, correctional officers, and incarcerated children. I was surprised by what I saw in other countries, but I was even more surprised by the stories that I heard right here. Dostoevsky once said, "You can judge a society by how well it treats its prisoners." Lights, please. Jail.
You couldn't even see him on top, looking in isolation. You could barely see him. You had to look inside to see him, which is hard, knowing that sometimes it could be your child.
Definitely. Definitely. This boy asked to hug his mom.
Renata Handens, author and activist.
Once they said life, he hugged her and he would not let her go. It took about half a dozen to 12 police officers to pry him off of her, to escort him back to jail, where he would spend the rest of his natural-born life.
He's 10 and charged with a felony. This is a small child. I mean, he barely clears my hip when I have on heels.
Anonymous public defender.
He's bawling in court because he has no idea what's going on, and he's terrified. That's where we're at now. We charge 10-year-olds with felonies.
The bailiff says, number 7 and 8, mother and young man coming forward. Young man, improperly dressed. The judge says, it's not a good path. Child poet.
I feel like a goldfish in an aquarium. No love, no emotion, I alone. I feel like a goldfish in an aquarium. No love, no emotion, I alone. I'm caught in a trap I can't swim out of. There's no telling when I'm going home.
Of the 58,000 juveniles arrested in Florida last year, 2,700 were in Jacksonville.
And more than 1,400 of them were for minor offenses.
While the rest of the state has reduced the number of children detained relative to arrests, Duval's rate has increased by 28% since 2006.
Duval commits more children per capita to the Department of Juvenile Justice's prison system than any of Florida's 12 most populous counties.
Now those are some startling facts and figures.
I've told my staff on numerous occasions, the most shocking part of this job is trying to correct misinformation that people buy into without knowing the procedures.
Meet Florida 4th Judicial District State Attorney, Angela Corey.
The criminal justice system is an extremely complicated system with all sorts of rules and procedures and laws and case law. It's amazing. Overnight, 4 million people become lawyers over the internet.
Florida will pass laws, and they'll pass laws without being as deliberate as they should be.
Now meet Assistant Public Defender and Juvenile Director, 4th Judicial Circuit, Robert Mason.
A lot of the significant laws that hurt children in this country came from the 90s, when there was talk of super predators. And we thought the super predators were coming.
are bigger than any person in this room. And some of them are meaner than anybody you've ever come across.
Prosecutors. They have to justify in their own mind what they're doing, so that's hard. They have to feel that every time somebody gets punished, it was the right thing to do.
There's been a lot of talk that we filed many more kids than anybody else. And the numbers just don't support that. We're pretty much in the middle.
Crime continues to go down. Juvenile crime continues to go down. However, media coverage goes dramatically up, and that's why people have skewed views of what really exists there. And because you're constantly focusing on the worst things, people just think, oh, that's horrendous. When in reality, juvenile crime is lower than it's been since the 50s. But you can't get people to accept that.
Those statistics come from the Department of Juvenile Justice, not Angela Corey. We are 7th or 8th since I took office, so don't believe everything you hear. I think it's especially reprehensible when leaders of the community tell statistics that aren't true.
The bailiff says, number 40 and 41, mother and young man coming forward. The judge says, is he behaving himself? This child is a threat. Child poet.
If my grandmother were colored, she would be brown, and she would be caramel, because she is kind and sweet, and loves to help. And if she were to be a plant, she would be a lily plant. She would be a lily plant because she always smells good. And if she were a sound, she would be soft music that relaxes me.
When I was a teenager, I had my fair share of fender benders and speeding tickets, and my mother would be like, what's wrong with you? I didn't know.
It's fascinating seeing how car rental places won't rent cars to people younger than 25 because the brain is still developing till about 25. They get it. They understand it. But juvenile justice? We don't get it.
Take a young man that's 14. He does not understand the consequence of his actions. He's incapable. The brain has not matured.
Now meet activist and mother, Judy Thompson.
But we sentence him, put him in prison with adults at age 14, 15, 16, 17. They can't even vote. They can't join the military. They can't legally take a drink. But it's okay to direct file them and put them into an abusive structure with adults and think they're going to be okay? To me, that is unconscionable.
Then there's Dr. Lawrence Steinberg, distinguished professor of the developmental psychology at Temple University.
No one is saying that kids who commit horrific crimes shouldn't be punished. But since this person is likely to change, why not revisit this when he's an adult and see what he's like?
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm a lawyer in private practice with the law firm of Holland and Knight. We have a long-standing tradition of giving back to our communities.
This is Buddy Schultz, and he's done his homework.
It has to start with the known, undisputed fact that their brains are not developed. You could look at it on the other end. We have compassion for elderly people who suffer from dementia. Their brains are affected by their age and their maturity. At the same time, children are affected by their age and their immaturity. You can look at a child's brain through an MRI. You can see anatomically the immature development, the lack of development. It's no different than looking at a fractured leg on an x-ray. You can see it. We would never tell that child who's got a fractured leg that we're looking at to run to first base. Never. Yet we impose adult behavior and punishment on children. I mean, it's just... I talk too much. But we know children are not young adults.
The United States Supreme Court, the American Medical Association, and a lot of very wise people are understanding. Children aren't miniature adults.
And now a word for the Partnership for a Drug-Free America's Parents' Guide to the Teen Brain. Have you noticed any of these effects in your teen?
Difficulty controlling emotions.
A preference for physical activity.
A preference for high excitement.
A preference for low-effort activities.
Video games.
Sex.
Drugs.
Rock and roll. Poor planning and judgment. More impulsive behavior, including experimenting with drugs and alcohol. The United States Supreme Court has stood up and said, wait a minute, these are kids. They don't have the capacity not to be impetuous.
Thanks, Judy. That was 2005 Roper versus Simmons. The U.S. Supreme Court outlawed the juvenile death penalty. Justice Anthony Kennedy wrote the majority opinion.
Differences between juveniles under 18 and adults demonstrate that juvenile offenders cannot, with reliability, be classified among the worst offenders.
These crimes are adult crimes. They have nothing to do with impulse control and everything to do with plotting and planning.
Youth is more than a chronological fact. It is a time and condition of life when a person may be most susceptible to influence and to psychological damage.
Back in the Middle Ages, the Spanish Inquisitor thought that it was justified to burn people at the stake.
The punishment must fit the crime, no matter what the age.
Ruling by fear and intimidation is what dictators do.
Juvenile killers deserve adult justice.
Treating teens like thugs is not constructive.
The prisons are full of people with poor impulse control.
Man, I hate internet comments. Anyone can say anything when they're hiding behind a keyboard.
We do not prosecute based on public opinion.
The personality traits of juveniles are more transitory, less fixed. Once the diminished culpability of juveniles is recognized, it is evident that the penological justifications for the death penalty apply to them with lesser force than adults.
They're not grown. They're still growing.
Anonymous mother.
They still learning. Their mind is still developing.
You completely lost your youth. All of it. And for something you did when you weren't even fully developed. Especially males. They're not developed at 14. They don't know how to control their impulses, their anger. They make irrational decisions based on their emotions. So I have to beg people to ask the question, are you the same person you were at 14?
Sometimes our state tends to forget that it's a child. I don't care about what's going on in this situation. I care about that the actions meet the definition of a crime by the statute. That's the starting point, instead of actually looking at the child's life. And that's sad.
I believe in accountability.
Anonymous public defender.
There is something to be said for getting booked, being handcuffed, spending the night in jail. That can be an eye-opening experience for some kids. I think there is some value to that, and we have some kids that it shocks.
I understand the argument that they're not mature and that sort of thing, but a lot of the crimes that they commit, they know are wrong. We know this by what we know they're being taught, but also by the way they try to hide the crimes that they commit.
And after that thing happened, my son, he said, Dad, he said, I'm so sorry.
Now meet Naren Chem, 55, and his son has been in prison for 11 years.
You know, that thing happening that you have to go through, all this, he said maybe God punished him because he lied to me, you know. That night, because he's supposed to go to sleep, but he sneaked out of the house.
I had one little girl that came through there. Never been arrested before. She was out with her friends. Straight A student. Honor roll.
Anonymous security officer at the Juvenile Assessment Center.
Got caught up with her friends. Got caught shoplifting. Stealing. She didn't really steal nothing expensive or anything. And she's sitting in there. She's boo-hooing. So you know me. Automatically mother. So I go over there and I talk to her. And I'm talking to her. And I asked her, what's going on? She was more upset because her mother's going to be disappointed with her. You know, I'm looking at her. And she doesn't need to steal. She was distraught for disappointing her family.
Now meet Daryl Cope, juvenile probation officer.
You know, we see oftentimes that these kids are raised by aunties, grandmas, and mothers. It's not as often that we have a full intact family with both parents there. It just doesn't happen.
I graduated in here. I graduated on June 4th.
That's Alyssa Beck, and she's been in the downtown jail for 2 years.
My family got to come. I actually got to hug my mama, hug my little brother, hug my sister, hug my grandma. And it's crazy. Like, my mom was like, what you want? And your high school diploma? Or to hug me? I said, Ma, I want to hug you. I had my whole life to get my high school diploma. You know what I'm saying? I want to hug you.
say things like they want to give their kid up, and we tell them that's not really a possibility. They're not like dogs. You don't turn them back into the pound because there's no refund policy. You don't return them.
I have a son in prison, and when you go to visit your family in prison, you meet another family. It's somewhat of a microcosm. It's a subculture of the society in which we live. You have more than one family. We're all facing the same things and dealing with the same issues. So you become close.
I have my godmom. I've been in foster care for almost 11 years now, so I really don't have no family.
Marquise Bates, 19 years old, inmate and trustee, Duval County Jail.
My godmom, she's been standing strong by me. She's been encouraging me. I talk to her every day I'm home. She keep money on my commissary and keep money on my phones. She a real godmom. I love her to death.
I have one parent raising 7 of her grandchildren, and pretty much half of them were in the system because Granny's too old. Granny can't go and find where they are at all times. She can't run down on the block and see why little Johnny's selling dope on the corner. She just can't do that.
Of course, the kids often aren't in school. Now, they may not be in school because they're selling drugs, or they may be selling drugs to feed grandma. We don't know.
Now meet Dr. Mary Barron, UNF professor of English, poet, and founder of Living Inside, the Arts Inside the Jail program.
My involvement started when I was asked by the Jacksonville Arts Council to help write a grant to bring arts to the jail, particularly for juveniles. Juveniles who are accused of serious, usually violent crimes are not held in the juvenile facilities. They're held in downtown jail, which is technically the pre-trial detention facility. So there's very little for them to do. They can sit in their cells, which have 2 to 3 men, for as much as 23 hours a day. It can be a very terrible way to live. I was asked to fulfill the grant, and then the students themselves asked me to keep coming. This young man stopped me. It was the last class in spring, and he said, "Miss Mary, can you do something here in the summer?" I can hear him now, and this is the quote. "We just sit in our cell and be bored. Because there's nothing to do in here. There's no TV, there's no radio." So that's how I started coming every semester. And after the grant ran out, I just continued to volunteer. I had one high school teacher who made the difference, who wrote a letter and got me into college. So I really try to be that teacher for my students and say, look, you know, you've probably had it worse than me, but not as much worse as you think. And you can change your story. The first time I went in, I brought in this book, The 3 Little Pigs. Here are these 3 pigs. The 3 pigs are living in this story, and this wolf keeps trying to eat them. The pigs say, essentially, this story is not safe. I'm leaving. So narrative, which is what we technically call a story, is how we frame our lives. And we all have started narratives for ourselves, but you have a narrative. And I try to at least get these kids to think about the narrative they've been given, the narrative they've been handed. I've had kids, you wouldn't think it would hurt them so much, but I had one young man who just could not get over the fact that the judge called him a monster. Now, I'm assuming since the judge is not an evil person, I don't know him, but I've been in his court. Probably the kid did something that got the judge to feel that way. But the child was still deeply hurt, and it was because his story didn't include him as a monster. He was still seeing himself as someone who could change his story. So the other side of a story can change your life is a word can kill. And that's biblical. Life and death is in the power of the tongue.
The bailiff says, number 67, young girl coming forward. No guardian present, Your Honor. The bailiff says, the judge says, act like a civilized human being. Child poet.
If God were looking at my life, He'd wonder why I treat people the way I treat them. Cheat them, teach them, and defeat them. He'd understand that I need them. I beat them. But at the same time, I teach them. He'd remember how things were going when I was very little. Like me and my homeboy, trading systems for pistols. He'd know that I'm crippled, mentally, but not physically. My life was like a riddle. But I'm trying to change certain things, like dreams and schemes in the way outside my jeans. He'd know how hard it is to change, because by any means, I need food on the table to feed my team. He'd lead me to my new future dream.
Child poet.
If God were looking at my life, he'd wonder why I sin too much and don't obey my elders. He'd understand that I'm changed and I take care of myself. He'd know the way things have gone for me. They've gone bad. Feels like nobody there for me. He'd remember how things went when I was real little. Like me hanging around the wrong crowd, doing wrong. He'd know that I was trying to make a change in my life. He'd know that I'm trying to change certain things, like change my ways towards others, do positive things. He'd know how hard it is to change, because life's hard when you ain't got nobody to look up to. He'd want me to understand that life is more valuable than I'm making it. If God opened a new door for me, then I could start over with my life.
Child poet.
I feel like life's hard. I don't know why. I feel like I'm alone at night, but I know God's on my side. I hear creepy voices. I wonder what I live. I'm lost at church when I feel mistreated. I'm lost at home when there's no one to talk to in time of trouble. I'm lost when I see my mother start to struggle, trying to make it in life. I feel like life's hard. I don't know why. But when I find my way, I will walk in a new direction. I will walk away from my so-called friends who call me trouble. I will also treat others the way that I want to be treated.
Do I feel safe in jail? I'm a Christian. Don't mess with the Holy Spirit. Once, several years ago, I had a problem. A fight broke out between two of the guys in my class. The other guys just surrounded me, with their backs to me to keep me safe. I have no fear of being in here.
Now let's meet Jared Powers, Executive Director of Faith for Freedom, mentor and sponsor of incarcerated men.
And I started reading the Bible, and on December the 25th, I asked my girlfriend before I got arrested, I said, I want a Bible. Really? You know those people that's coming over to my house getting high, and I'm sitting here reading the Bible. They're like, hey, Ace, do you want? I'm not like, no, I said. I just want, hey, check this out. So I'm reading this Bible, and I get arrested. I started like any other book in Genesis, so that by the time I'm here in jail, I'm in Leviticus. And they're talking about blood sacrificing. I said, God, I don't have any bulls to sacrifice. I said, but if you want my life, you can have it.
Now it seemed like everything fall apart. You know, I always blame myself too. I say, what did I do? What have I done? What should I have done, to avoid all of this? I tried so many things all those years until my son, he told me, Dad, please stop blaming yourself. It's not your fault. that is the day that I kind of, stopped thinking about that, and I just look at it. Maybe that's the way God planned it for us.
I don't like to do the big church thing because I don't like eyes watching me when I'm praying, because that's the time I'm most vulnerable.
That's Asa Lamar Harris, a kid we met serving 45 years for a non-homicidal crime. Now check this out. In 1983, Florida abolished parole. Then, the U.S. Supreme Court made it illegal to sentence a juvenile to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Ever. So, you're in jail for life, and they tell you you can get parole. But hey, they say this is Florida. You can't get parole. So what do you make of that?
The Bible says that God gives the person that prays in secret more than he does the person that prays in public. Because the person that prays in public does that for show. So, I do pray. I do believe in a higher power. I do believe in God. And I do believe that without him, none of this would be happening to me. I feel like this is a tremendous blessing. That something I said weighs a lot. Because people continue to come. Hey man, somebody want to see you. Somebody want to talk to you. They want to hear your story.
There's good evidence that incarcerating children isn't necessarily a good idea. What we do in this country is criminal. The UN Convention on the Rights of a Child has been adopted in all but 3 countries in the world. I think they're East Sudan, Somalia, and the United States. We treat children more harshly in this country for allegations of crimes and crimes themselves than virtually any country in the entire world. Other parts of the world look at what we do, they can't believe it.
And Florida incarcerates more than anywhere in the United States.
Now that's Harry Shorstein. He's Angela Corey's predecessor and former boss. Now, let's listen to this anonymous mother.
The system, I can't quite put words to it, but it's not one of rehabilitation. It's absolutely punitive, and there isn't a whole lot of help to be had. It's not set up to help families. It's very much a punitive system. We have this illusion that our children are basically protected, and it's just not true. It's a very flawed and broken system.
The state attorney has all the power, more power than the public defense's office. Not only in juvenile cases, but also with adult cases. That's why they can afford to offer you a plea of 3 years. If you don't take it, you're going in for 30. And they do it all the time. They have that leeway.
Yes, Florida is unique. The state attorney has more authority than the chief prosecutor in almost all states. We can charge any person with any crime, which is the stroke of a pen.
There was a really great article in Folio Weekly a couple years back. 09, I think. Anyways, the author, Gwen Stewart, she says it's easy to politicize the juvenile justice system. Democrats versus Republicans, liberals versus conservatives. You've got the law and order people saying, we should coddle criminals. And then you've got the bleeding heart saying, we should let these poor little darlings rob, murder, and steal. So with all this back and forth, what happens is this. The moral problems of juvenile justice are typically, like she says, overshadowed by rhetoric. Now let's look at direct filing. It means that you charge a child as an adult. It sounds simple. In practice, it's not so simple. Now you're going to love Rob Mason's analogy. He calls it, get this, the magic wand effect.
You're up there in adult court, and it's like the state's attorney's office and the judge have a magic wand. They say, poof, you're an adult now. Yet the child standing next to me is still 15 years old. I wish I had a magic wand at a sentencing, because I would say, poof, now you're a 75-year-old investment banker charged with embezzlement. Now we're ready for sentencing.
Direct filing means the state attorney office has the power to do it. The judge cannot reverse it. Even if he sees there's an error and it shouldn't happen, the judge has no power.
Now listen to this.
In some other states, there's panels that make that decision. But here in Florida, it's solely at the discretion of the state attorney. We're tough on crime. I think how easy it is for a first-time offender, for a child, to be prosecuted as an adult. I think that's the best kept dirty little secret around. I had no idea getting into this that was even possible. When people hear my son's story, they're horrified that he was even charged as an adult. My son's victim stood up for him. He was there at almost every single one of his hearings. He pled mercy for my son. It's almost unheard of, and it made no difference.
We have a state attorney right now. No nonsense. No nonsense.
On October 31st, that's less than 2 months ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center announced the formation of the Jacksonville Juvenile Justice Coalition. One of the missions of the JJJC is to address bad practices. Florida's Department of Juvenile Justice research shows that transferring children to the adult system increases, guess what? Recidivism. It also makes us less safe. Yet, Duval transfers children to the adult system at a rate that is 20% higher than the rest of the state average.
That is such a lie. It makes me so angry because that got printed in the local newspaper. The public defender counted that we led the state in juvenile direct files, and that Duval led the state, and that Florida led the country. And it's blatantly false. We are 7th or 8th in the state, which is actually, if you look at the size of our circuit, it's middle of the pack, 7th or 8th. So it's so offensive that people would lie to begin with, and that people would perpetuate that lie. So people need to don't believe everything you hear until you see it with your own eyes. And I think it's especially reprehensible when leaders of the community tell statistics that aren't true. So those figures come from DJJ themselves, and I'm happy to share those with anybody that wants to see them. But to create that kind of concern, when you have enough concern about the criminal justice system, doesn't help anyone. It truly does not.
What we do get, we get a lot of children where their options are either plead and go to this maximum risk juvenile commitment, a year to 3 years, or we're going to put you in adult court. Kids plead to avoid it. Kids plead for many different reasons. They plead because they're guilty. They plead because they think it's in their best interest. They plead because they're terrified.
Did you see the Times Union last Friday? Natasha Stevens, the Northwest Regional Organizer of the ACLU, wrote a guest column. She says that in Florida and across the nation, leaders are recognizing that criminalizing routine adolescent behavior is a mistake.
That's just a huge issue, this over-incarceration. Children get arrested in school for sometimes very minor behavior. We have a charge in the state of Florida called interfering or disturbing a school function. A criminal charge. A criminal charge for acting up in school.
Now here's Michelle Stevens. Michelle founded Families of Youth Incarcerated, and her teenage son was tried, sentenced, and incarcerated as an adult.
There are a lot of kids getting arrested in school for what we did as normal kids growing up. Throwing an eraser and it hits somebody. They're not even hurt, but that can be aggravated battery. And they're arresting these kids.
We have children as young as 10 years old being prosecuted that have mental health problems, that are emotionally disturbed, that really need some significant help, and in their fits of anger, and sometimes it's because they're not on their medication, they may touch or push a teacher, and they get a felony charge. So we have young children who get felonies when they have mental health issues. Shouldn't be happening. You'd have to go across the street and talk to them. There have been so many times there haven't been adequate explanations.
And we're going to do things the way we've always done in the 4th Circuit.
You know what they do when they direct file a kid? I mean, when the state attorney's office files a kid as an adult. They stick a form letter in their file, and it says, "It is our hope that sentencing appropriate juveniles as adults will deter future juvenile crime, as well as protect the public from present crime." That's called covering your ass.
Duval leads the nation in prosecuting children as adults.
is Dr. Michael Hallett, UNF Professor of Criminology and Chair of the Criminology and Criminal Justice Department. He has done a lot of research on this topic.
And the solid majority of these children are African American. While African American children under 18 comprise roughly 37 of the total juvenile population in Jacksonville for the 2011 to 2012 fiscal year, Black children constitute fully 2/3 of all juvenile arrests in Duval County.
There are racial disparities when it comes to determining whether or not you're going to direct file a young man. It depends on the color of your skin. It's tough because we don't want to talk about the racial overtones of the criminal justice system here in the state of Florida. But I'm sorry, when 60% of people incarcerated are African Americans, when we only comprise 14 to 17% of the population, there's something wrong. You've got a lot of racial disparities here with respect to criminal justice because of the premise on which it is founded. It's almost like, let me give you an example. If you're in prison, whether you're a juvenile or whether you're an adult, and you get a DR, that means a disciplinary referral, and it's because an officer doesn't like you, or he say, boy, pick that up, and you didn't do it, well, you can get a disciplinary referral, which sends you to jail in prison. It's called confinement, but it's a jail setting within a prison setting. So, if you didn't pick it up fast enough, he can say, they disobeyed direct orders. I still picked it up, but I just didn't run over. Because you talking about you was with my mama last night, and you was using the N-word, and they do it all the time. The procedure is followed. Now I got 30 days when I didn't do anything, because the premise on which I was found guilty is not factual.
That isn't true. That just isn't true. I'm sorry that they feel that way, but I'm not going to sit back anymore and listen to that accusation when there are no statistics to back that up. When the police go to a scene, if there are 2 or 3 people there, if they commit the same crime, they're all going to get it, whether they're black, white, male, or female. So just isn't that kind of discretion for law enforcement officers to pluck out, one person because of their race or gender. It just doesn't happen that way. And so I'm sorry that they feel that way, but the statistics do not bear that out.
So, people have very deeply held convictions about race.
A lot of my clients are African Americans. A lot. I would say 85% or so of my clients are. And I'm not quite sure why that is. Sometimes I think it's because of the areas. And several of our judges have even said on the record, some of the problem is crazy family dynamics. One of the biggest common denominators is no doubt. Single moms come in and you'll notice all the time. You look at the arrest and booking report, the kid's file name is always different from the mom. I would say a good majority of the time. It's more the exception than the rule to have the last name be the same. And so you always see that. So you know the mom's not with the father. There is never a dad. Either the dad's not around, or they don't even know who their dad is. So you have single moms raising a bunch of kids, and they'll have a lot of siblings, none of the same fathers. That's a problem. If you're raising your kid in the hood, and you're expecting your child to grow up and to make good choices, but he lives in the hood. I understand it's hard sometimes to move out of a bad neighborhood, and one of the judges has said this several times on the record. You really can't expect your children to have healthy role models and to strive to be better when you're raising them in a bad area. And maybe it's time to stop having kids. I mean, sometimes it's the justice system just responding to the way society is. I grew up in the country, and we weren't really about that kind of stuff.
But when our children, and I'm talking our children, the black children, the minority, they'll sentence them to a life sentence. They don't care. It don't matter. Because they feel that that's what they deserve. But they're human too.
I'm Noah. I'm 20 years old, and I'm a registered felon.
I'm 21 years old, raised in the beaches. I have a history of immaturity. Call me Blackjack.
Case in point, Chicken Little. I think he was maybe 18 or 19. He laughed at the fact that he had some drop-back-in program that Jacksonville has for high school dropouts. You know what he told us? He's like, I live a great life. My mom works at Phelps. I was like, dude, oh my God. He's like, you see these slippers? My mama bought me these slippers.
Yeah, you start to see how shit becomes so much more situational because, you know us, we're like those educated kids. You know, we were just fucked up because we were being immature.
My dad, I don't know where he at. Last time I heard, he was in prison. Like, my mom, she was in prison most of the majority of my childhood. Like, my daddy, he wasn't never really there for me. He ain't never done nothing. He bought me a little toy Hummer for Christmas and a portable DVD player. That's the last time I saw him.
So, what do we do with these kids? Do we try to rehabilitate them? Do we try to just stick them all in commitment programs? Do we just give them civil citations? You know, a slap on the wrist?
Civil citations are somewhat controversial. Civil citations hold a child accountable without giving them an arrest record because nothing goes away in this internet age. You can seal, you can expunge records, but that information is out there. Private companies are buying it up.
Other areas, they've had great success with it. Instead of calling the police, having the child arrested and cuffed and taken down to whatever assessment center they may be, they issue a civil citation. Here in Duval County, we do have a civil citation program. It's just not as widely used as in other places. And a lot of that comes from the direction of the state attorney's office because they don't want us to use it as it's used in other places.
Nothing in the criminal justice system should ever be called civil. It's misleading. Let me give you one example. We give citations to all of the young people who come to Duval when they join the Georgia-Florida game.
Now, I grew up in '55. When I grew up, we talked about the Soviet Union and China locking people up, and it was this really bad thing, and now we're the ones that do it with this industrial prison complex. There's no doubt about it. We've just gone too far. We've punished a lot of normal teenage behavior. Things that years ago got you a lecture from the police, now that they're arrests, they go on your record and they follow kids forever.
Direct filing, aggressive overcharging, and racism. I hate to say it, but there's a whole host of problems, including the abuse that comes from the privatization of prisons. Privatization. A lot of prison contracts have been sold to the highest bidder, especially right here in Florida. There's an expose in the Huffington Post. It's called Prisoners of Profit. And it's all about how the U.S. Department of Justice is looking into for-profit prisons.
When I first got here, it was 2 years ago actually, I was 16 at the time, so it was really difficult, me being 16 and all. But I came and they had no other place to put the juveniles. So I was certified as an adult. So they put me in lockdown. It's called FOXA. People call it punt patch. And it's 23 hours lockdown. And I can't explain how scared I was. But I tried to act like I wasn't scared, you know? Because I didn't want to show no fear.
The pumpkin patch.
Yes, pumpkin patch. Yeah, about pumpkin patch. Well, what it's like is like a mental health lockdown. It's pretty much where mental health people go. People that self-harm or suicidal or homicidal. But like I said, they really didn't have anywhere else to put the juveniles. So they put us there. So we were like in the, I guess, pumpkin patch. I said 23 hours lockdown. We're in a cell, a small cell, all day, 23 hours. We come out for an hour, which is to make a phone call or get in the shower. It's all it was. There's a lot of violations in the system, and officers that are abusive, and many of them are. They are. Some of them will kill an inmate. Plenty of wrongful death suits in the Florida Department of Corrections. The crimes that are committed against inmates in some of these dungeons are worse than the crimes the inmates committed to get there. You've got an excellent staff at the top, but there's a disconnect. Florida Department of Corrections needs to get off those lofty seats and needs to get into the institutions and see what their people are doing. See how inmates are being treated, because they're being treated in some of these institutions worse than they would be in concentration camps. Abu Ghraib.
YSI, Youth Services International. That's the company that actually runs most of the private prisons in Florida. They even have a new facility here in Jacksonville, right off Collins Road, the Juvenile Academy. They manage more than $100 million in contracts. That's 10% of the system. They're also making large donations to political campaigns right here in Florida. $400,000 and counting. $400,000. Now, we're going to listen to Evan Jen, a former state representative.
You're talking about society killing children. It's politically motivated and it's money motivated.
What is wrong? I know this might sound crazy, but I'm really starting to believe it's all about money. You know, there's a lot of big money in the prison system. And those doors revolving keep revolving. And they keep the doors revolving and people in business, and they're starting to arrest young kids, younger and younger, so that they can reoffend and they can just keep the door going. You know, it's all about the money, because it's definitely not about providing them an education. It's obvious it can't be anything else, because why would you not be helping kids, you know?
The phone calls. I cannot remember the rates, but when my son would call from Duval County, the phone calls were limited to 15 minutes. And I want to say they were costing $6 a piece.
Now, phone calls are nothing compared to the private programs.
It's very expensive. Sometimes like $300 to $400 a week. Because, you know, it's a camp where someone goes there and lives there for a week. You know, weeks at a time. And you think about the cost of a person staying for a week in terms of food, and it's very, very expensive. And the parents just don't have that kind of money. You know, most of our clients aren't, well, they're paycheck to paycheck, their families, so they can't afford a camp that's, you know, going to cost $2,000 to $3,000 a month. It's just not doable.
If you ever want to get a lawyer, buy one with money.
Yeah, well, I'm a lawyer in private practice with the law firm of Holland and Knight. And we have had a long-standing tradition of giving back to our communities, primarily through our pro bono legal services. The best example is hard for me to talk about. I could show it to you. I represented a 12-year-old little boy who every time I walked away from him, his last words, he would hug me, and he's incarcerated. He'd hug me and he'd say, "God bless you, thank you for what you're doing." And one day he said, "I want to give you something." That's to express my appreciation. "I don't have much," he said. And he gave me the 2 cookies that he had gotten for a snack from the canteen that afternoon. And just incredible. He didn't have anything he could give me. Nothing. Except a hug and 2 cookies.
And this lady, oh my gosh, I call my grandma. She's in here, and they're trying to give her the death penalty. And she strives to do the best for other people. She'll get 5 packs of noodles and 2 chips, and she'll give them all out. You know, she'll do it for other people. And that just inspires me. I'm like, dang. You know what I'm saying? You're facing the death penalty, and I'm facing, nothing, and I can't do that. But you can. That really just touches my heart.
There is no love in an institutional setting. People come in to do their job, so you become a piece of property. When you become a piece of property, it's easy to see other people as having no value.
While I'm there, I'm paying attention to their names, because I don't want to say, "Hey, you," or something. As far as what kids are used to, they're not used to being called by their first name, because I ask them, "What's your name?" They give me their first name. Most people, adults, they say their whole name. Kids say their first name. You know, even though I have to record both, they give me their first name. So when you try to build rapport with them, you remember their first name. You try to teach them. You try to make them feel as they're still a person. I allow them to feel like a person until they take that away.
I'm a good person. Not just what they see of me in prison, in jail, not an inmate. I'm a real human being just like everyone else.
Remember, these are juveniles. That's all they are, kids. Most times when you're talking to them or whatever, and you get that respect, if I respect them, then they'll understand I'm talking to you like a normal person, like somebody. And they say, auntie. These kids love to call me auntie. Just a pet name, they call me. It's an endearing name, so it's a good name. And most times, they listen.
We see people in jumpsuits. We see people in cells. We associate those people as bad people. And that's not always the case. There are great people, some great people in prison, who are incarcerated, who've made poor decisions in life. And that's those young people that I portrayed in the book. And I think the most shocking thing is when they talk about the things that, when they become human. And that's what I wanted to portray, the human cost of juvenile incarceration, that they have feelings, they cry, they're remorseful when they have time to think about it. They're like, well, I did something so stupid. But no matter how sorry you are, no matter how much you attempt to rehabilitate yourself, you never fully redeem yourself from that.
We all human beings, and we all want to be accepted. Everybody deserves a second chance.
I figured it all out being in prison, being in jail, incarcerated. I figured that pride is the #1 killer. Because when you ask this question is, was it really worth it? If you could go back and change it, would you? 90 out of 100 say, yes, I would go back, I would do it different. I wouldn't do it different. It was just my pride was hurting. My pride led me to think crazy, emotional. I went and acted on my ignorance. My pride got hurt. Yeah? So, that's why I said pride is the #1 killer. We put our pride down, we can succeed and go so far. But a lot of times people don't. Their pride gets in their way. So if your pride is in the way, you can't see. Pride will help you, and it will hurt you.
It's just a lot of respect, you know. Every morning, they always use the baton. Wake up, wake up, wake up! Right? They bang on the cell, but when they get to my son, they do it. Knock, knock, champ, get up. So, they respect my son. He said, that's why I know what you told me is true. Yeah. Because I told him, I said, it doesn't matter how mean they are and all that. They are human beings like us. They have heart like us. They have the same color blood like us. But most important, they have their family too. One day, they think about, what if my son, my kid, you know, my husband, my wife, if you keep doing that to them, they might treat them better than the rest of the inmates.
We come back every month to visit the men. And that amount of time that you're sitting there with these guys, you have this kind of like motto: just listen, listen, love, love. There's a power in listening. And these men are not really listened to most of the time.
I feel a lot of these kids come here because they don't have enough attention. You don't have anybody saying, okay, I see you.
Child poet.
If my fist
It would tell you that I'm a fighter. If my feet could speak, they would recall how many times I walked in places. If my eyes could speak, they would tell you about all the bad things I've seen in the city of Jacksonville. If my pounding heart could speak, it would say I've held a lot of hurt in my life. If my brain could deal with everything, it would want to ask why I'm going through the things I'm going through now.
Child poet.
If my fists could speak, they would tell you the warning before I act out my rage. If my feet could speak, they would recall the hurt and punishment I have received. If my eyes could speak, they would tell you about the times I've seen things that are not meant to be seen. If my pounding heart could speak, it would say the pain it took from my life. If my brain could deal with everything, it would ask, why?
I tell them I don't have a doctor in front of my name. I have 8, 8, 8, 9, 1, 8.
They were so young. 14, 15, 16, 17, 8, 9, 10 o'clock. They don't care.
They call me out by my last name, Becky 66, because I'm in room 66. They say, Becky 66, please step out.
My release date was 99, 98, 99, 99.
I had to pull over. Indian River is about 4 hours away from Jacksonville, 4 to 5 hours, and I had to stop at a town, some town, to compose myself. It wasn't just the idea of meeting him or his situation, but that was an entire facility with over 1,000 young people who were under the age of 18. And the way I parked, the city dump is this way, and the facility is behind me. So I parked facing the dump. And just that piece alone, just thinking that these kids are in prison, and the only view of outside they see is where all the city's trash goes.
Prison is a harsh environment. You know, if you don't have anyone while you're in prison, it will drive you crazy. A lot of people become what society would deem as institutionalized. You know, they have no support. They turn into what people call an animal, a monster. Because what do they have to go home to? What do they have out there?
Child poet.
I'm addicted. I'm addicted to juvie, a place where you stay locked up in a small cell, a place where you have to eat what they serve you, a place that is filled with a lot of anger and hate. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to hate, where every day is a constant battle with myself. Hate, a place that leads to nowhere, a self-destructing habit. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to weed, a drug that makes everything seem better, but it's just an illusion. A drug that makes me happy for a minute. When I come down, it's me again. A very sad and depressed person. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to sadness, a place that I hate being. It's a very cold and scary place. I'm addicted.
my family. My family is filled with lots of hate, betrayal, lies, and sadness. I'm addicted. I'm addicted to juvie, hate, weed, sadness, and family. I'm addicted because I've never felt any different. It's the only thing I know. It's a constant battle. I'm addicted.
Child poet.
I am the future, lost on a journey, thriving for family, drunk with attitudes, committed to living the wild life, worried about too much, thinking about everything, always screaming on the outside but praying on the inside, afraid, hiding behind the scenes, always valuing life, never taking it for granted. I am the future.
I am stunned by the pain in this room. It smashes into me like body blows.
You remember Dr. Mary Barrett. Those are her children poets, and this is a poem of her own.
Reading your words back to you, I am in control of myself only, despite myself. I seem to be watching this from far away. I thought I was one. I am many. All week, your faces loom behind my eyelids. In my dreams, we walk the streets, but are often apprehended. Last week, I threw away every extra key I could find. I have silenced the ones I must bring with me. I move quickly through ID check, through the barred doors, a sharp tone in someone's voice. My body shrinks into survival. What can we build, brothers? We have absence, anger, emptiness. We have endurance, language, time.
So you have to maintain hope. It's prison. It's not a leisurely vacation. So you have to maintain hope to maintain sanity. If not, you'll go crazy. So I give them a voice from behind barbed wire, steel, fences, guards, gun towers. They have a voice, and that's my entire movement, to never, ever give up hope.
I have all these tattoos. This one used to say hate, but I changed it to hope. And it said hate because, that's how I felt when I first got here. I just had a lot of hate in my heart. I had an unforgiven heart. But now, it's changed because I have hope now. I have hope for the future. All right. My plan when I get out of here, or whenever, is to get my diploma, finish school, because that's all my mama want me to do, is finish school. I say, I just want to make her happy.
We stereotype criminals and thugs. And no one is the same thing all the time. A thug is not a thug when he's around his mama.
It was a holiday. I think it was Easter. We were asleep, and I wake up and roll over in my bed, and I see this little homemade basket. I mean, it's like I can hold it in both hands. It had a little scripture on it saying pretty much never give up on God, and it had some candy in it. It's I woke up and I'm oh my gosh, that really touched me because it's dang, someone really went out of their way and did that. And I never found out who it was.
I just want to speak on behalf of my son. He's incarcerated, and it hurt. And I love him. And I want to see him free. And like 40-something years old, and I like what I see. I like that he's grown up to be the man that I raised him to be. And he do regret what happened. He wouldn't have been there. And I'm proud of him. He's got his GED. He's working in a law library. And I'm praying for him. And for the Lord to put his hands on him. And just to keep him safe. But I like what I see.
We all mess up sometimes. No one is perfect. It's what you do afterwards that counts. So if I had the opportunity to go out of here right now and go home, but I couldn't be a motivational speaker or help anybody in my society, give back to my community, I'd rather stay in prison. Because it'd be like I'm worthless now. And I wouldn't do it for a moment.
When we talked to them during their interviews, we asked if there was anything that they wanted us to know.
I want them to know, like, this ain't no place for nobody. I wouldn't wish this on my ready enemy. This emotional stress, all kind of stress, emotional, financial, all kind of. You ain't got money, none of that. This ain't where you want to be at. Even if you do got money, this ain't where you want to be at. This ain't nothing but a waste of your life you can't get back.
And look out those windows. I can see the boardwalk. I can see right here. I can see the stadium. I can see all the people walking with their family. I want to experience that. I want to experience being able to come by and take a walk in the sunset with my wife. Just walking on the boardwalk. Just enjoying life. Just be able to sit down and enjoy nature. Something that I took for granted. A lot of stuff that I took for granted. Freedom. Winter. Milk. Smaller stuff. Bread. Peanut butter. It's the small stuff that people take for granted. A place like this is supposed to make you remember.
I just want to let everybody know that the way I raised my children is no different from other family. We always want best for our children, but it's just one of those unfortunate things that happen to us. And we have to go through that. And of course, you know, I still go through that. And hopefully, one day in the future, the near future, Jimmy get his freedom back.
You said you got so much potential. Man, you got a testimony. A real life testimony. Tell it. Give your story.
Sometimes I feel like